Yo, yo, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy 3 Stiggity Stacks in this thing, baby, representing TKOG. Thank you, Lord Jesus. And today, I'm coming at you guys with an update for Zephras. So I was messing around with Sword Soul and Runic Zephra builds. I went back to my classic Madolche build, where the only hand traps I ran were Gamma and Nib. And then I also decided to test the Therion build. Planet Pathfinder is one of the main go-to normal summons for a lot of my Zephras builds. I mean, the build it diversifies a lot with the normal summon that you opt for, and that's where a lot of variants do differ, because some will opt to play like Sator Knight, Deneb, some will play Pathfinder, some will play Madolche cards, some will play Ancient Warrior cards, some will play Sword Souls. The normal summon's a big deal in this deck because it doesn't need it, so that's where the variants are easier to incorporate, because you're not kind of meshing or bypassing anything that is necessary for the Zephra cards to like function properly. You're essentially just swapping something that you can easily incorporate or take out for like something different. So the normal summon is the easiest to sacrifice in this deck, so that's where like a lot of the different variants for my Zephra list, the big difference is just the normal summon I choose, because I don't like to normally take Zephra cards out to put other cards in. I simply like to add more cards into my deck, and this is the most consistent list up to date. It has access to more starters than I've ever had in a Zephra list, which is amazing. It has incredible protection to insulate hand traps and negations. Its boards are pretty powerful too. And one of the cool things is it does have a somewhat loop of recurring resources and the ability to just continue pressuring your opponent with negates and floodgates. You can play with two cards, which is a strength that most Pendulum decks literally don't have. You can play hand traps, which is a strength that most Pendulum decks don't have. And you also have really, really good insulation for board breakers, which is something else that most Pendulum decks do not have, being your searchable counter traps and your floodgates that bypass. Like, this bypasses Dark Ruler and Droplets and doesn't really care, about Super Poly. Like, most of the time, you're not even playing into it in the first place. So there's like a lot of good, and there's multi-purpose functionality, which is something that that's always valuable in regards to how I build my decks and the thought that goes into them. Just the things that I just really feel are just too good to pass up. So with all that said, if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel. Make sure you click the notification bell if you already are subbed. Leave a like and a comment if you want to support the algorithm. And if you want to take it further, you can check the description box of any of my uploads. I copy paste all the links to my Discord and also my Patreon. If those are things that you want to do to help me or support me, you can do so if you want to. So with this list, obviously it's consistent. I have room for a lot of non-engine, and the choices that I made are intentional. So there's like a lot that is standard, but there's also quite a few new things, stuff that really does make a big difference. And some of them were later releases that I didn't really see myself playing at first, but now I really value it a lot, and I like where the list is. So for starters, we have 3 Prosperity, 3 Oracle, the Terraforming, which this, along with Planet Pathfinder and Foolish Bro Goods, are multi-purpose because they also function as going second cards. Providence is just gas, you guys. This and Oracle gets you so much mileage, because anything that leads to Oracle or Oracle itself gets you to Anger Translator, and he also snowballs every turn he's follow-up, and you just +3. Essentially, if you have Providence and Aloska, you +3 because you get Zephrath, Oracle in rotation, and the Zephra that replaces itself on summon. So you get 3 cards onto field with another card back in your hand. So it replaces itself and gives you a +3 in value. The economics on this card are just insane. The protection, everything about it. It plays through hand traps if they hold there's not very many opportunities to hand trap this deck, so one of the few are on the power spells or on the Zephra. So if you hold this and Zephra gets stopped, you can always search whatever he was going to get anyways, which is always a nice thing. The Planet Pathfinder is just another Terraforming, but on legs. And because it searches any field spell, you can either search Mystic Mind, so it becomes a going second card when you need it to be. You can also search Oracle, so it can be a starter if you need it to be. You can search Therion Discolosseum, so it can be a Called by the Grave if you need it to be. So this, in tandem with the Gamma, is a really good way to insulate hand traps, which I like a lot. So it's a value that I wasn't able to get in my previous Zephyr list because the Therion cards were not out at the times when I was messing with Pathfinder. So he hasn't been this valuable up until now, where he could really do that other thing. He was always multi-purpose because he could search Mine or Necro Valley, which were field spells I normally played with my Oracle. But now with this Coliseum, he serves another purpose, being a protection to insulate like blowout cards, hand traps, a stronger way to set up a negate to protect my Pendulum summon. I don't really play in the nib, and most of the time Path protects me anyways, but just the fact that you can put a negate up before you even pin summon means you feel even more secure with your plays. So really incredible, great card. Along with goods, I do play the 2 bricks that go with them. I just play this because it's the highest attack value Crystal Beast, and it's a level 4, which is actually relevant. And obviously the bridge, 2 bricks in my opinion are worth 3 extra Oracles or 3 extra Mystic Mine or 3 extra Disc Coliseum. It is 3 extra starters, which I feel is just super duper valuable. And then lastly, for the kind of like package for going first, cards that also enable my plays, cards that insulate my plays but also enable me to break boards going second. So Disc Coliseum, Gamma, and Regulus are cards, along with like the goods and the Pathfinder. All of these cards serve a similar function, being that they can protect your plays before you actually get started with your Zephyr engine, and also allow you to end on a stronger board. So like the ceiling's higher with these cards if you open access to them or already have like the starter that you need, so that these can search the other card that you need them to search. And these, in addition to a playable hand, I feel is just really, really powerful. There's nothing broken really about Zephras per se. I mean, they can search any monsters, so post-siding, when you're playing against like decks like Runic, you do have like a pseudo FTK with like Exterio and a counter trap, or 2, depending on how well you opened, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, because like Runic just cannot out this card with their own engine. They just can't. So you do have some degenerate stuff. I mean, this deck, if Maxi was legal, this deck could search Maxi. There used to be a VFD combo, but I feel like the Zephyr cards are a little too fair. So you do want to play cards like mine, and you do want to incorporate other non-engine, like the Therion King Regulus. I think is just super valuable for this deck. You already have Omni Negates, but you don't have any type of protection before you pin summon. So this deck is always vulnerable before it actually can play. So Zephrath has always a huge target on his back for people that have played this deck once and they see what this card can do. A lot of times this is a card that gets stopped or hand trapped or disrupted. So, and you normally only have Gamma most of the time, and that's why you can't play Zephras without Gamma, because you're doing yourself a disservice by not playing Gamma to protect you from cards like Droll and Ash and anything that would hurt your starters or in your enablers before you pin summon. That's important. But now you have like searchable to a large margin. You have like 9 ways to get to this card, which is really, really cool. The issue is not having a machine in your grave, obviously, so like that's why Planet Pathfinder is ideally the very, very best way to access him. But the other cool thing is like Disc Coliseum's actual secondary effect, which is pretty bonkers for this deck, to just loop your Omni Negate every single turn, which is just gross. Like, it's so good. High key, and whenever you want to slap Oracle over this, you can always barricade blocker back the Disc Coliseum, because I just think it's just that good to have it in rotation. It's one of the strongest field spells that this deck can play, and it really gives you a feeling of security. And the recursion's nice. This deck already grinds pretty well, but to loop a card like this, it solves one of the problems that I've always had, which, like, once I've burnt through my counter traps and having no Omni Negate protection, it does kind of become difficult, because you lose the diversity in your interactions, and the value of your inboard kind of diminishes more and more past turn 1 and 2, which most games should technically be over by then. But this is a deck that's easily able to stabilize the game state to the point where it's mid-range for both ends. It doesn't matter if your opponent's playing combo, they're forced to play at the pace of a mid-range deck because of how Zephra operates, which means you normally give yourself more than one turn, which also means that it does come up having a recurable Omni Negate. So again, really good value for these cards. And then we have 3. And the protection too from battle is kind of crazy, that you can do this if like you haven't already gone through Regulus. That's one of the reasons why I have considered 2 this Coliseum, because like when this does get ashed or whatever and you have him left, the protection is pretty relevant. When you have Providence and this to protect your cards multiple times, it's always nice. But that's another reason why I have considered playing like more, but it's just like adding more bricks for a scenario that's not always going to come up is just not ideal for me. 3 Anger Translators. This is the man himself. Like, this pile in front of him all can search him. So you have 3, 6, 7, 10, 13, 16 copies, extra copies of him, which is crazy for your consistency. That's not saying this. Like, this is like the most consistent list. Let me put the gammas back down because it is organized. So going second cards are always last because they're not normally combo pieces, but at least my going second cards, some of them can be. So 3 Anger Translator, 3 Zephratherion, the lifeblood of the deck, kind of crazy. This card is how you just snowball resources. Every turn that you Pendulum summon him, you generate more pressure because extra bodies, like this deck will start with just summoning 1 Zephratherion, which can get you 9 pillars into a Zephyr Wharf, so that's 2 disruptions. So turn 1, unless you're playing multiple 9 pillars, turn 1 Zephratherion can be 2 disruptions by himself that don't lose to Dark Ruler or Droplets, don't lose to Super Poly, and hardcore counterplays, talents to a large margin too, because you don't really need to search off the Zephratherion if you don't want to, because a lot of times you can just open into the Divine Strike. Like, you have so many extra ways to get to the Oracle that the Providence most of the time doesn't have to get Oracle, being that Providence a lot of times can just search the trap if you need it to. So that's another strength with the starters, that you have so many more ways to access him that it turns into like this most of the time does not need to search a monster. It can just search whatever you want it to. So it becomes a pseudo called by pseudo I can play through more disruptions because you're going to stop me from searching a card that I can search with this anyways, which is really cool. Then 3 Zephratherion. This card enables more diversity because your inboards can now have the inclusion of synchros. This is how you get your search any monster combo off Crocosaurus. Crocosaurus is more ideal than Charge Warrior because you more often than not are summoning Zephratherion, so this card coming out can easily just be that combo for you. You have so many ways to access Oracle. It's ridiculous. This card can also enable Baron plays because you can just target one of your 4s and then turn him and that into Baron. So you got a lot of different ways to just diversify your interruptions. Your inboards aren't always crazy, but they're normally always just enough or sometimes more than enough. You can have overkill, which is always good, but you just got to open like all gas, all engine. But a lot of the times it's ideal to have 1 or 2 non-engines because if you're going second, you need those. This deck's not going to just break boards just because, Like, one of the coolest interactions with Zephras that doesn't always come up, but it's great when it does, is being able to just kill Appaloosa just by chain blocking like your ZEFRATHERION. It's incredible. It's something that this deck trades extremely well with monster interruptions simply because of cards like Thubin and Saiton. Just all the Zephras being able to chain block on summon, you can easily protect whatever effect you need in a lower chain link from like cards like Appaloosa and monster negates. Spell trap negates is what really is going to hurt this deck more. So that's where like Gamma is just such a powerful card because it's one of the few cards that can insulate that for you. And then we have Regulus, the 3 Nibs. Nib, just super high impact. You can also search it off Gallant for more pressure because that is actually a good play sometimes over Dweller in certain matchups because you need to not die. So if you have Nib plus the counter traps of your inboard, it means like even if your opponent's able to play through the counter trap, technically speaking, you don't even have to activate the counter trap until you activate Nib. So if they put up a negate for Nib, the counter trap would just completely nullify that. So Nib in this deck is actually very, very broken, being that you put up Nib plus a negate that cannot be interacted with because Reboot's banned anyways and it was at 1 in the first place. So it's one of the most powerful decks to actually end on Nib, which is kind of crazy. You wouldn't want to nib your own field, but your field's normally not that big, and your cards normally can replace themselves anyways. And most of the bodies you have on field have already done, like they fulfilled their purpose. They're just bodies at that point. So like most of your inboard is literally like link fodder for your next turn. So Nib's really, really, really good in this deck. And Nib, Imperm, and Gamma are the only hand traps I feel are worth playing this format, being if you don't have space for a lot, you're either going to play 1 of the 3 or 2 of the 3 or 3 of the 3 if you can Then if you have space for more, then you could put in your little Veilers and your Crows and your Bells and your Ash and all your low impact. But these trade extremely well across multiple matchups, and these are the cards that normally just prevent the most oppressive boards from happening, whereas like Ash, Bell, Crow, Veiler don't always do that. And if I'm going to play into talents, I'm going to do it with the high impact. I don't want to play into talents with the low impact and then they talent and take away my high impact. You know, I want to like crush them first. And then we have mine. We have all the traps as a brick, but you want to play it. And then I'm on Double War. I really like Double War. The crackback is what makes the second war so valuable, especially just hitting your own Oracle free real estate. There's a few interactions where it comes up, and you have to be in a really solid position. Like being able to actually play in the first place is the biggest one. But you can war going second from your hand, which is kind of relevant when you consider that like there are certain floodgates that really will kill this deck. So war is super important. Like if you can scale and then war, this will kill like floodgates that destroy this deck, like Rivalry, goes in. TC Boo is the only one that doesn't really matter. This deck actually can play TC Boo, and then you have the counter traps, these Omni Negates that protect your floodgates that you end on. So floodgates that you typically would end on would be stuff like the Shin Shin or the Path, or you can do your Croc Stack Draw combo to get to either a high impact, your Planet Pathfinder if you haven't done already, or post sighting, you will get your Cyberstein. And also post sighting, you can Ravenous Stack Draw Shifter if you don't have monsters in your grave, which most of the time you don't, unless you open this and had to resolve it, and also had to like activate a power spell. But it's a possibility. But Shifter, being the card that it is, as good as it is, I would have to change the way my deck is built just to be able to play it. And I just feel like, again, just the way the deck's designed is just not a good take to want to incorporate Shifter into. There are a lot of Zephyr variants that you can play Shifter in, but this is one where Shifter takes more from you than it would give in most situations. The only time it's ideal for this deck is if you go second and Shifter your opponent. But if you go first, you don't really care as much about Shifter because your inboard already has different lingering effects or floodgates that normally just are hard to break through. You know, this deck's boards are not the best, but they're sticky and they're really, really diverse, and they do insulate a lot of blowouts and a lot of high impact going second staples that just can't be used. And then that's what I mean in terms of insulating. So this deck's boards are harder to break than boards that are actually bigger and look better. And I know it sounds crazy to say like combo decks like tier, like combo tier for example, like Sprite, like Bystead, Dragon Link and stuff like that. Those decks boards look better, but they're not as difficult to break as this deck's inboards. Even though this deck's inboards, you'll look at it and you'll be like, oh, this guy's playing Pendulum Salads. Like that's not a good inboard. That's not a real board, but it is, and it's good. Because 1 or 2 floodgates plus 1 or 2 Omni Negates with follow-up, recursion, stability, and enough defense so that you will not die is a lot better than 3-4 negates that can be played through and you could still be killed. Especially when you consider that most of the time half your interruptions already insulate and or mitigate high-impact blowout staples like Droplets, Dark Ruler, Mystic Mine. Counterplay for Mystic Mine's incredible, and also cards like Shifter don't matter. And in addition to that, like you don't really have to play in a talent, or you have counterplay for it. The last card, I feel like Path goes in and out for me, but right now I'm in a very comfortable position to main it. It's not that crazy against tier, but what it does do to tier is it puts them in the position where they only can really use their starter. And as long as you have this plus any other solid interruption, like to stop the Pelorino, like most of the time they need to extend from the hand to be able to keep playing. So it's more like it's like a Kaiser Coliseum, but for like monster effects against tier, because it doesn't stop them from summoning, because most of their summoning comes from the extra deck in the hand anyways. And I'm sorry that I said from the hand. I meant the other way around, that they can't extend from the grave or from the deck. But like it's like a Kaiser Coliseum for monster effects to an extent against tier. It's this card being in the main deck was only debatable because of tier, because like tier normally can just like play almost optimally with this card up. But the restrictions that it places on him is good enough for me to where like this is okay to add to my end board. Either this or the Abyss Dweller are okay to add to my end board. Like I like this a lot because like it does stifle a lot of other meta decks, and with Tier being one of the few exceptions where it doesn't just auto lose to it, but it does restrict a lot of what they can do. I mean, most of the time, like again, this card is something that you don't blindly go for, but if it feels more valuable in the main deck for me right now than in the side, because the only reason why I didn't want to main it was literally because of Tier, and I feel like Tier's not the only deck. You know, every other deck struggles a lot to a large degree against this card. So I feel like why, you know, like why would I not play it? It's a great card. It's one of the best Floodgates like ever printed. It's so good. So for extra, we have Baron, we have Shin, Croc. Shin's just another Floodgate I really like to end on cards. So good in certain matchups. Like people forget that this is actually a good card. Like it's been so long since like Virtual World was prevalent that we don't see Shin as much, but it's like it's so crazy. Croc, we have Omega mainly because of Gamma. I like the Omega Lambda Gamma package in Zephra. I always play these cards. Metaphys Horus is so insane with Oracle. It's just broke. You can chain block this card. You take your opponent's monsters, summon Dampier, just clear fields the long way. Link Climb. You have Lambda, IP, and Barricade for your Link 2s. Barricade's really good in this particular variant, being a machine, being able to add back your one-ofs. Super valuable. Boral Sword, I need to kill you, Link. I just need this deck. Really has it has a good time like generating advantage and bodies, but a hard time maintaining offensive pressure. It just has really good defensive pressure. Like it's super good at just again stabilizing, simplifying the game state, forcing your opponent to play mid range whether they like it or not. But it on the crackback it struggles killing, and that's why Boral Sword is always going to be better than Access Code for this particular deck. Goddess, just so you have the space, you might as well give yourself some outs. Gallant and Dweller are the only rank 4s I feel matter in this deck. Other rank 4s are debatable, but these are the only ones that are non-negotiable. Dampier, oh my goodness, what an incredible card, you guys, so powerful. And then Zeus. Zeus matters. Like Zeus matters. Non-targeting, non-destruction removal is not hard for this deck to access, but like because I have the extra deck space, I feel like why not give me routes through XYZs, routes through links, and routes through synchros. This actually does not affect the monster, so in certain situations it can take towers monsters if your opponent only controls them. Like if I'm playing against Adagnister, funny enough, this does come up. Like if you're playing against Adagnister and they end on just that link, you can just activate this effect, and as long as like you have protection or whatnot, you can force your opponent. Like if you can put up like Regulus, that's the ideal play. Summon this and force them to give you their link, because it affects the opponent and not the player, which is really, I mean, it affects the player and not the monster, which is really good. It's like unique to this card. So like you have a synchro, a link, and an XYZ like non-targeting, non-destruction removal. This is in my extra deck, even though I sideboard the Exterior, because I didn't want to side Exterior and sideboard the Stein. I didn't want to side both, because like then I run out of side deck space. And the side deck in this deck is you already allocate like 5 of your side deck slots for like different combos going first, because you switch stuff out like depending on the matchup. Like you have like Necro Valley and like Cyberstein, then you have like Majesty's Fiend. So like you have like Cyberstein in the Exterior for like control decks and Runic, then you have like Necro Valley for like Tier and other graveyard decks. Then you like go into Majesty's Fiend for like combo decks, because like they need to activate monster effects to play, and you just like protect that stuff. So like you have all these different Floodgate win conditions that you sideboard. You can't main all of them because you can only pick one every turn. So that's why I don't main any of them right now, because like currently my normal summon always is going to be Pathfinder. Game 1 when I'm blind, I always feel like this is the safest way to go. I don't know what I'm playing. It offers value to me, diminishes value from my opponent, and it's not matchup specific. It respects all cards. There's no way that it's just not good. Whereas the other ones that I sideboard can be situational, and that's why they're sideboarded. So thank you guys so much for watching the video. God bless you. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay tuned for future content. I will be updating a lot of my good old-fashioned, go-to decks that a lot of people came to this channel for. So stick around for that, you guys. Peace.